Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Welcome to this morning's session. My name is Kevin McLaughlin. I'm the local advisory committee chairman for this conference, and I welcome you all to this session, executive session on new collaboration models within the exploration domain. It's an early start, so I welcome everybody and I want you to engage and participate. This will be a live session. I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute here of how exactly the session will continue. Going back to yesterday in the introduction that we gave, the context of the theme of the whole conference, energy, technology, sustainability, time to open a new chapter. We're going to discuss this and hopefully have a good debate with the panelists today, engaging in your questions. So as I said, please be ready and join us, and let's have a really good exploration of kind of the concepts and also the possibilities. The intent is to discuss two themes today. The first being effective collaboration to shorten cycle times in exploration to first production, and we have some very good, very qualified speakers to talk to this subject. Secondly, the second topic is we'll do this on supply chain collaboration, looking for innovative solutions. And I think that's one of the themes that we'll be looking for as we go through the session. Of course, technology is a part of this. Of course, cost cutting is a part of it. But innovation, to me, is one of the keys to the future. In the context of this, it's very clear, and I think it'll be an interesting dialogue with the panel today, some of these critical topics as we strive from an exploration perspective to improve our performance. I talked yesterday about the context of the business we live in and how difficult it is, in fact, as we try to reduce break-evens, try to be more profitable with our new projects, and in fact, depending on which types of projects you look at, actually make our projects economic in a world of the $50 lower for longer context. We also have to remember that our job in exploration is not just to find barrels. It's, in fact, as much as to find barrels that our companies want to develop and to create value. And that's not always obvious. Sometimes when we're going into deep water or even the future now in the ultra-deep water. I expect this discussion kind of to focus on key ways of working as well between the operators and the suppliers. And in the panel, you'll see as I introduce them, we've got it very well represented. Again, with this concept of how do we improve how we work together, this collaboration part. I expect we'll touch on safety, cycle times. I think cost has to be part of it. It's clearly one of the elements to reducing break-even. And as I commented yesterday and earlier, the idea of technology and what can technology do, and are we investing enough in technology? And then again, the topic that I think needs to be discussed is this integration, and what does that mean? Integration within the project, integration between the supplier and the operator. All of these aspects I think are worthy of discussion today, and I hope that we go down these pathways. Now a little bit on the panel and the format. It'll be my pleasure, and I will introduce the bios of each of the speakers ahead of their introduction, but I think you'll see from the slide we have a very distinguished panel today. These are the key leaders in industry, and we're very lucky to have them to comment. Just in order, so Ashok Bellini from Schlumberger, the Chief Technology Officer, Luca Bertelli, Chief Exploration Officer from ENI, Howard Leach, Head of Exploration at BP, Jean-Georges Melkor, CEO of CGG, and Eric Oswald, VP Americas for ExxonMobil Exploration. In terms of format, we'll do the two sessions separately. Each of the three, there'll be three presenters for each of the sessions, and they will give you a 4 to 5 minute insight into their view of the topic. And then we'll go, after those three speakers speak, we'll go to a Q&A session. Hopefully you've all downloaded the app, because there will be no live questions in terms of microphone interaction. So all the questions you have to ask need to be done via the app, and there's a very clear, and I'll just step you through that. So hopefully you've downloaded the app. If you haven't, please do so. And then you go to Program, select Executive Program. Then after that, you'll see EAGE Forum, and then it's simply you look for Press Interact, and then select Ask to insert your question. And you can insert your questions, of course, multiple times. You have a choice of being anonymous and naming your name. If you name your name, I'll recognize that when I recognize the questions. We are being live streamed, which is very interesting for those that are online watching us. And we would ask actually just to add interest for us, for the room as well as for the audiences. If you're asking questions from the internet and from live streaming, maybe you could make note of that and we can recognize you as well. You'll notice on the side I have support from Olivier Perret. Olivier is the chairman for France, Schlumberger, and Jean-Christophe Navarre, who is the VP for Exploration Excellence for us at Total. And they'll be working to help us with the technology to live stream, to consolidate all your questions, and I have them here on an iPad, so just to let you know that they're there to support us. Okay, let's get started. The first topic, effective collaboration to shorten cycle times, will be introduced by remarks from Luca, Jean-Georges, and then Eric. So let's start without further ado. Luca will lead the discussion. And just a little intro for Luca. Luca's been the Chief Exploration Officer at E&I since 2014. He joined E&I as a researcher in 1984 in 3D seismic prospecting technology, and has held several management positions covering seismic subjects, geophysics, geology in general over the years. Luca's career has taken him to work in several countries, including Norway, Indonesia, Egypt, Angola, where he's held technical as well as managing director positions. So Luca, we look forward to hearing your remarks, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everybody. I'll go through a picture of the industry today and how collaboration could help our business in these tough times. So since 3 years, our industry lives in a context of low oil and gas prices. Price forecast has always been wrong in the past. However, we expect that also for 2017 and 2018, we have to face a low contest of oil price. To overcome this very long period, it's 30 months now, of low oil price, the industry went through a complete reset and learned how to live at $50 oil price. How to live, but how can still improve the performance of our industry in a low oil price environment? I think we need to make a distinction among unconventional business and conventional players. In the unconventionals, that is a typical US phenomenon, few companies are making skinny margins with $50 price. And these are the companies that has been capable and able to combine high quality unconventional acreage in the best basin with high operational efficiency. Among the conventional players, these are the companies that has been capable to rely on low-cost producing assets base and high operational efficiency and to master the technology. But if this price will persist, how we can deliver to our shareholder remunerative business? The first and the main problem of our industry in the last couple of years was to realign cost at the oil price. It takes a while to achieve this, but today, after 30 months of low price, we may say that this has been almost achieved in all the supply and the service chain for the upstream cycle, and we see marginal room for further improvements. As a matter of fact, cost of materials are already growing up again. The cost reset allows the oil and gas companies to survive, but has heavily impacted the service industry, from geophysical to drilling contractor, as well as the engineering companies. So the industry has still skinny margins or no margins at all at 50 barrel oil, where we can work to improve profitability of our business. We do not believe that cutting workforce is a solution. Losing skilled resources and expertise to survive is probably a low-term solution with several negative side effects. We need to keep our most skilled people, and we need to work on something else to improve our performances. In my opinion, this is to shorten the cycle time from exploration to first production. One of the characteristics of the unconventional business is that the timing between investment and cash flow return are shorter. This allows the unconventional companies to react quickly as the oil price changes, breaking investments in case of oil price drop, and accelerating them in case of the oil price rises. Conventional assets have always a much longer cycle time between the initial exploration phase and the cash flow returns. So a conventional asset-based company, to be profitable at low oil price, has a priority objective to rely on a low-cost asset base and to shorten the timing between exploration, spending, and production startup. What I say, we need to put an unconventional focus on our conventional asset. Reduce the distance between unconventional and conventional asset cash flow profiles, and reduce times to market from exploration, discovery to the first oil and gas. How can you make it? The starting point is always critical. We have to select simple, conventional asset, both in case of liquids and in case of gas opportunities in areas where the market and the infrastructures are already developed. And then we need to be efficient. This, of course, has an impact on deepwater exploration sometimes, but we need to realize that we need low-cost asset base. In my team, we call it design-to-cost exploration. Then we have to exploit at the best in the upstream cycle the technology, starting from the data acquisition till the final data interpretation. In this cooperation with the geophysical contractors, also with innovative business schemes like multi-client surveys of innovative procurement strategy, is crucial in these times, both in offshore and onshore, but requires respect of the different roles without hampering the business each other. Another key step in the process is done through the technology and the skill of our people. The availability of petaflop class machines, coupled with high-end depth imaging algorithms, scalable algorithms, reservoir simulation, scalable algorithms, and also petroleum system modeling are definitely the vehicle for the industry to upgrade our upstream process and achieve a shorter time to market. We can significantly shorten this process, allowing at the same time and a better and a closer cooperation and integration of all the geoscience sectors: exploration, reservoir, drilling, and also development. After discovery has been made, resource conversion efficiency, that means when you transform your exploration resources to reserves, for me will be a key performance indicator in the near future of the upstream companies. Faster and better to reduce time to market, mitigating risk, and uncertainties. We have today in ENI a 6 petaflop machine serving the upstream process with all our proprietary algorithms, and we aim to reach 10 petaflop capacity within the year. The availability of such computing capacity and leading-edge proprietary technology allow us to strongly parallelize exploration, appraisal, reservoir, and development phases, reaching an effective collaboration throughout the whole upstream cycle. In the near future, the full digitalization of the upstream cycle, as well as the utilization of big data, will further enhance our capabilities to steer the right decisions in a more and more compressed cycle time. I just want to make a couple of examples in our exploration, and both come from Egypt. First one is Nurus. It's a gas and condensate discovery we did in the shallow water of the Nile Delta in July 2015. Roughly estimate of 3 TCF in place. We take the FID 1 month later. We had the first gas 2 months later, the discovery. 2 months of time to market from the discovery to the first production. Today, the field produces 1 BCF per day and is the largest gas field producing in Egypt. We booked proved reserves of this discovery within the year of the discovery. And another example, Zohr, supergiant gas discoveries, this time is in the deep water of Egypt, 190 kilometers far from the coast. Discovered in August 2015, we managed to take the FID 7 months after the discovery, in February 2016, and we expect to have the first gas flowing within 2017, just 30 months after the discovery. Last year, we booked reserves, proved reserves for months after 12 months from the discovery. So this kind of performances would not have been possible without heavily changing our way of working, improve our upstream processes and all the upstream cycle, and we need technology for this, and we will need more and more technology in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much, Luca. Very, very insightful. And we'll come back, and I hope that's a great start to the forum to stimulate your questions. Okay, let's switch now to our second speaker. Jean-Georges Melkor, as I said, is the CEO of CGG. Jean-Georges began his career as an acoustic engineer with the Thales Group and then worked in several organizations through various leadership capacities in France and Australia. In 2002, Jean-Georges went back to Thales and became Senior Vice President of International Operations, later holding similar roles covering Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. Jean-Georges joined CGG in 2010 as president and became CEO later that year. So, Jean-Georges, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kevin, and good morning to all of you. So after this presentation from Luca, I will move into the OFS world. And I'd like to offer a few comments and maybe ask some provocative questions. First of all, working together means for me a lot of trust and standardization. There are some areas where clearly it's a no-brainer. Let's take, for example, HSE. Why should we argue about standardization and common approach on HSE? It should be in our blood. It should be a joint approach from the suppliers, the customers, the suppliers of the suppliers. It has to be a holistic approach. And I don't see why this particular matter, which is so important for all of us, should lead to any, let's say, competitive discrimination. The second point I would like to discuss about massive cost reductions. For the last 4 years, in the current context where we're operating, the whole industry has gone through massive adaptations. And here we're not talking optimization about 5-10%. We're talking about slashing in the cost by 50, 60, 70%. All of that is good and was probably necessary. But the question I like to ask is, have we reached a point where we have a sustainable industry going forward? We have a paradox. We're living in an industry which is very strongly capital intensive. And yet, so this capital intensivity should have in front of it visibility, long-term commitment, R&D, and yet at the time being, we have very poor visibility. It's extremely difficult to make a huge decision in asset commitment, in CapEx, while basically your horizon is less than 6 months. It's difficult to convince a board to put a lot of money when you don't have such a visibility. So this is a very important point for us because, yes, we have been adapting massively in cost. And again, I agree with Luca, it was absolutely necessary because we had a cost base which was too high globally. When I say we, I include the customers as well. Okay? And the point is that we reach a level where it is sustainable, which is a key point for us. The third point is about collaborative approach. Clearly, when we speak among us, and most of the time, there is a strong will, strong understanding that we need to collaborate better. So again, it's almost a no-brainer. But yet, when we go into the pudding, and we are in the hands of the procurement people, we have a different talk. We have a different reality. And, sometimes this approach, which is wished, which is, welcome at the senior level, does not transpire, does not percolate into the organization. And most of the time in current environment, the collaborative approach means lower price. Not best value for money, lower price. So that's an interesting, and I'm sorry to be a bit provocative, but I think it's important. The fourth one, and you touch on it as well, Luca, is about the new technology and the integration. I'm not coming from, I don't have an oil and gas background when I started work, and I was working for a defense industry, and I thought that this industry in defense was extremely conservative. And when I moved in the oil and gas, I was expecting to have something extremely daring, dynamic, ready to go. Not at all. Not at all. I found a very conservative sector. Not because we are not interested by technology, we are very interested by technology. But the time it takes to bring a technology, a good idea, into reality, into taking risk to apply it on a workflow, is far too long from my point of view. And if we want to reduce, the time to first oil, we need to be more daring in terms of adopting new technology. Because the world is moving so fast around us. You mentioned the computing power, Luca. It's fascinating. When I arrived in CGG, we have 10 petaflops installed. Today, we have 60 petaflops installed. And my guys are putting things on my desk to go to 100. So we are just in a kind of environment around us which is moving so fast that unless we adapt and we embrace these technology changes, we'll be left behind as a sector. The other point, and by the way, on the technology and innovation, I'm critical in saying, because I want to be a bit provocative, to say that we are too slow. But in the past, we have had some excellent examples where the technology had made a huge difference. I'd like to mention a few of them. Look at the wide azimuth techniques in the Gulf of Mexico. It has been a revolution to understand the very complex structure, the subsalt, very complex structure. Take the work which is being done today, and it's still early time, in AUVs, and taking the men out of the loop in complex operation, HSE expos and so on. Things are moving on, but we should be really striving, all of us, to multiply the speed of adoption by probably a huge quantum. The fifth point I like to bring is the Paeonia Spirit. In the past, geoscientists, geophysicists, geologists have always been associated for me to a pioneer spirit. Our guys, they like to go on the ground, they like to go in the most unexplored party of the world, they are prepared to take risks, they know how to deploy 1,500 people in the middle of the jungle or in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the Alaska. This is what they like. And this is a huge expertise that our generation has embraced and has mastered. This involves a lot of socialization with the local people, as you know. This involves a lot of care for the environment. And this knowledge today, if we don't have enough work, enough business to project our younger generation in the field, for them to also embrace this capability, I'm afraid that at the end of the day we are going to lose a lot of expertise, not necessarily technical, but the real know-how, the deep know-how that you have inside you, and that we would like to pass to the next generation. So, for me, it's an interesting time, this trough, this difficult time, because it's probably the time where we can bring the most change management, not only in our company, but in the whole sector. We probably need to reinvent the way we are working together. We have to be challenging, we have to be daring, and sometimes we have to be a little bit impertinent, with the respect, of course, always with the respect, but I think we need to change the lines. There is no real true model, there is no one-size-fits-all, but I think that initiatives have to be welcome, and we need to create an ecosystem which are encouraging our young generation to challenge us and to challenge the way we're working. So with that, I will probably stop here at this stage.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Jean-Georges. You certainly challenge, and I think it's great to hear your frank and I think really pushing the limit of our insights on how we work together, and we'll come back to that in the questions. Okay, the third and last presentation will be from Eric Oswald. Eric is the Vice President, Americas ExxonMobil Exploration Company in Houston, in that role since 2014. Eric joined ExxonMobil in 1991 and has held a variety of positions, technical and managerial positions covering research, production, exploration in the regions Middle East, West Africa, Caspian region, and Europe. So Eric, over to you, and we look forward to hearing your insights.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. So Luca and Jean-Georges have given you a great overview of kind of where the industry stands right now from the perspective of an operator and the perspective of a service provider. So I thought what I would do with my comments is tell you the story of an oil discovery, this one in Guyana. One, because we're all explorers and we love hearing about the rare and exciting event when we have a big discovery somewhere. But probably more importantly, it'll be useful in illustrating some of the things that we're going to need to do as an industry moving forward to be successful. So to tell you that story, Guyana, there was a big oil discovery there in May of 2015. Something, over 1 billion barrels, and you'll probably see press on this later this week that talks about the FID and the development of this and shows you some even larger resource numbers. But to tell you the Guyana story, we have to step way back into the late 1990s, and at that time in a research part of Exxon, there was a group of geologists trying to work out the plate configuration of the Caribbean, something that people are still trying to do. It's a pretty complicated part of the world. And these guys were trying to figure out various ages of the plates that were sliding out in front of the northern part of South America. And they came up with sort of a new idea that allowed for ages of source rocks to be laid off the coast of Guyana that hadn't been anticipated prior, by our company anyway. So they took that piece of information or that insight, and then there happened to be a regional line where some seismic company had kind of rolled around the world and shot various lines, transverses across the shelves. And they had this line, and they put together a story where they thought they might be able to put source rock out there and then have a reservoir story that had some kind of strat trap sitting off of this small South American country. Guyana is a fascinating place. It's one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. It's only about 750,000 people, mostly rainforest, a former British colony. It's in pretty rough shape. It's a pretty poor place. They suffer for basic education and safety and security down there. So these fellows went down in the late 1990s and talked to the government, got an agreement to basically tie up most of the offshore of the country under a license that would allow the company to explore there. Super high risk. There wasn't any oil or gas around in the area. No sooner had we signed off that license than the block went into force majeure because the Guyanese hadn't worked out their border issues with neighbors in Suriname. And so for the next 8 or 9 years, nothing happened there. It sort of sat quiescent as these two countries worked it out. Then in 2008 or 9, they finally came to some agreement on the border, and we went out and shot seismic there. It was a huge block, 6.6 million acres. So you can imagine how difficult it is to start looking around out in an area that size. We shot some 2D, shot some more 2D, and then in 2013 we thought we had some areas that might warrant some 3D, so we went in and acquired 3D in those areas. Finally picked an area, and then we needed some partners. We were with Shell for most of that time, and then Shell decided to exit, and so before we drilled a well, we needed to have partners to drill the well. So we showed it to most of industry. I think 23 or 25 companies came and looked, and Nexen and Hess joined us to drill the well. And that happened in May 2015, drilled a successful well, and then we were off and running. So I tell you that part of the story because that's not exactly very quick or agile, as you know, my peers have pointed out as necessary. But the story going forward from that point is truly remarkable, because the first problem that we had to deal with is we had a very small 3D survey over the discovery. We didn't really know what we had around us, and so it was very difficult to build a development concept and put together a plan for an FPSO and how you would go about developing this field without knowing what the associated discoveries might be. And we needed to acquire 3D seismic to be able to do that. We were also running out of time on the license, and so we began a negotiation to get more time on the license with the company. But in the case where we weren't able to successfully negotiate that, we needed to drill up as much as we could on the license, so we needed 3D to do that. So we worked with CGG, and this is actually one of the greatest partnership stories I've ever encountered in my career. These two organizations worked very closely together to design and execute this survey. The survey was 17,000 square kilometers. It's the largest proprietary survey that ExxonMobil had ever shot. And when we drilled the exploration well, which was a very high-risk well, we were basically planning on how to deal with a dry hole. You know, we were going to shut down the office and get out of there for as cheaply as we could. It was a less than a 1 in 5 chance event that this thing would come in. So we were scrambling when the discovery came in, and within 10 weeks of the discovery, we had worked with CGG to be off and acquiring this huge seismic survey, which is a fantastic deal. I mean, credit to all the people that were involved. But we all know in industry the normal time frame that we use to plan and shoot a seismic survey of that scale is a year plus, and so it really had us scratching our head, or why do we take so long to do this when we know that we can do it under short time frame? And then there was great communication and co-working with this effort as the survey was shooting, because we were trying to figure out what to drill as they were going out and shooting the survey over the areas that we thought we might need to drill. So 9 weeks after they started shooting, we're already getting tapes off of the boat to set up the prospects to continue to keep the rig down there to keep drilling. So extraordinary effort on their part, and there's a lot of great technical work that went on with CGG, changing things on the fly, changing shooting configurations, changing processing configurations on the fly, and it's a credit to all the folks that were working together when we did that. What that allowed us to do was drill more discoveries, and we're still down there drilling, but to keep that rig active because of this great collaboration on the seismic. And that then plays into being able to get the right development plan, to start things up. And where that led us in Guyana was a phased development, so an FPSO, initial FPSO that will go down there and take the first part of the field, and then there'll be subsequent boats that'll come in and pick up the rest of it. The first FPSO, you'll see FID, I imagine here in the next couple of weeks, you'll see some announcements about that. That's 2 years after the discovery, so for a big offshore deep water oil project, and we should have oil flowing on that 4 years after. So again, to this point of the standard industry deal for a big oil discovery that's out in ultra deep water, we usually say 7 to 10 years or some number like that we throw around. And when you know that you can accomplish it in much less, I think it means we really need to challenge our own organizations and the industry to take a much more aggressive view at getting after this stuff and reset kind of what the standard times actually are. Because as Luca has pointed out, much of the deep water investment right now is really challenged. And if you kind of run that at what's happened over the last 10 years in terms of timing and cost and schedule, it is not going to compete with the large investments that most of us can make onshore U.S. in tight oil. So for us to move forward, I think we're all going to have to be doing things quite a bit differently than we've done in the last decade and be a lot more effective with that capital. Guyana is hopefully an illustration of that, and we'll see, as we continue to drill into the higher risk part of the portfolio, we'll see how it goes. But we're off to a good start there and have a nice discovery coming in.
Great. Great, thank you very much, Eric, and I appreciate your telling us the story. I've been personally waiting. I've talked to Eric and others in ExxonMobil, and thank you for sharing the insights, especially the history. It's great. Okay, so now is the part we'll move to Q&A. There's a few questions rolling in, so now's the chance to ask the difficult questions, the bold questions. Our colleagues in the corner over here are going to help me to get the questions rolling. Maybe I'll start with one, maybe coming straight back to you, Eric, if I could. And it links to what Luca was saying as well. And you talked about it, and the question is really, we're going fast, we're investing quickly, the cycle time is obvious, and I was very impressed with what you did in terms of the collaboration. But equally to that, you're taking risks with the investments on the rig and the going forward and cycle time with regard to uncertainty and the knowledge and, in fact, your systems. And so the question is, how do you balance the range of uncertainty during that live appraisal phase while you're trying to accelerate an outcome that's still unknown? So maybe you can add your insights on from the project's perspective or perhaps as this question's posing from a process perspective.
Yeah, it is one of the biggest challenges that we have is, especially after success, you're very susceptible to sort of gambler's ruin, being able to destroy all the value that you created in the prospect. So you have to stay extremely disciplined on the risk-reward analysis. And for those of you that don't do the business regularly, it's a very simple concept. It's just you're always trying to balance the probability of success, the probability times the value of success in dollars needs to be weighed against the probability of failure and the cost of failure in dollars. And that equation and that math, it can get fairly complicated when you put in all the various scenarios that go into it. But as long as you're disciplined about balancing those equations and making sure that risk analysis is always making sense, you're not gambling. You're playing with the odds. The normal thing that many of us do is the argument becomes emotional. So as soon as you have a great success, you think you'll continue to have success, and you're willing to kind of ignore the math and move down the path into drilling higher risk things. And once that equation becomes unbalanced, then you're essentially gambling. You're kind of playing against the odds to win. So I think the key to that is very careful risk analysis. And Kevin, to your first point, historically, we're a business that runs on barrels and talks about barrels a lot and getting volumes of gas. And I think all of the companies have moved very successfully recently to being much better at stewarding value. And that means that there's a bunch of different players in the room. It's not just a geologist and a geophysicist. There's political people, there's economic and commercial people. And so you see the teams become much more multifunctional. Team analysis and teamwork is much more important than it's ever been in the industry. And that discipline around making sure that all those voices are heard and that's a coherent analysis becomes really critical. And I've seen in all our competitors, I think I've seen that. So that gives me a lot of faith, going forward that the industry is going to perform better.
Great. Yeah, very, very insightful. Okay, we'll move to a second question, and this one will be for Jean-Georges, I think. Following up, Jean-Georges, you talked a lot about collaboration and what that really meant, and maybe even how hard it was how in principle it made sense, but how hard it was in reality to achieve. And the question is really, the question is an anonymous question. I should have said on the first one as well. There appears to be a lot of appetite for collaboration, but it always seems hard to achieve or driven by necessity of low oil price. Can the panel, so Jean-Georges, can you give us some examples, successful collaboration, and we kind of heard one from Eric already that you were involved in, or the companies where you've been involved, Jean-Georges and CGG, that you'd like to exemplify perhaps?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to mention a few, perhaps taking one in the acquisition and one in the processing side. On the processing side, with the demultiplying factor that we have, the computing power, and the fact that we are now able to run new algorithm, the collaboration with our customers, with actually all of you around here, have a terrific, success that can be mentioned. For example, we have been able to revisit regularly the velocity model in the Gulf of Mexico, and with this new model, reprocess data which were shot years ago, and extract value out of this data in a way which was almost unthinkable at the time. And this is a good example where this collaboration, because I was critical, but there are also some very good cases, luckily. This collaboration is really a partnership between the technical teams on the floor. People are talking to each other, they are challenging each other. And what we like on our side is when the customer comes, being very straightforward and say, here are my problems. How can you help me solving that? And this is, we are in the technology world, in our sector. And our guys likes to be challenged. And when we are able to create this link between the team, which by the way has to be built in time, is not something which happens overnight, this is really a fantastic power play at work, which is yielding to great success. So for me, the good example is what happened on the subsalt in the Gulf of Mexico, but to a certain extent also what happened in Brazil. And in a total different view in the Middle East, where on the acquisition side we have been able to, with what we call the mega cruise, going from 5,000 channels to 10, 30,000, 50,000 channels, 100,000 channels in some instances. We're not quite at 100, but at 50,000 sure. We have been able to achieve, in close collaboration with the customer, two things. First of all, increasing significantly the number of vibration points per day, and becoming a routine of having 24,000, 25,000 vibration points per day, which means that we are able to optimize and operate the crew 23 hours and 50 minutes per day. And that's really something that we can achieve only if there is a collaboration with the customer. And so again, when we manage to break, if you want, the procurement chain, the classical procurement chain, and move into the reality of the meat, these are very good examples. And the last one I like to mention is what we have been doing, and I will pay tribute to this smaller operator with Lundin, for example, who are extremely eager for new technology, and they don't hesitate to test new technology in real time at sea. And for us, this is invaluable, because when we come with an idea, they come with a challenge, and within 6 months, we're at sea testing. So there are some good examples where we can move fast and where we could have a good collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can all learn from those, and I appreciate your insights, Jean-Georges. I'll move to a question for Luca now, and I'll add my own comment. It's an anonymous question, but Luca, you talked very insightfully and very impressively on Nurus and on Zor, and I think we're all in awe of what E and I have done. Your points were taken about cycle time. If those aren't classics, then I don't know what is. And the question that's come up is really about procurement, and it's a question of, maybe from the E&I perspective, what had E&I done? We all of our companies, whether they're large or small, have their own processes and procurement, and Jean-Georges even commented about it. So maybe you can share, and the question is, how do we improve our cycle times with the procurement side, and how did you get to achieve those tremendous outcomes that you saw in Egypt?
Well, definitely procurement strategies are an important matter in compressing our upstream cycle time. And this is, I think, just from the starting of a process when we do data acquisition, exploration, and then after the discovery has been done, into the development phase. I agree with the comment of Malcolm saying that the real collaboration at the end of the day is the lowest price. This is true. If we don't change the way we are thinking about contracting strategy, also in the upstream cycle. And definitely the data acquisition industry is the industry that has suffered and is suffering more in this downturn because it's a basic brick of our work. If we don't have data, we cannot do exploration. And if they die, we die. So we need to work together to find cooperative solution. And we need to put effort on this, like we did after the discovery. Try to streamline our procurement strategies in simple packages that can be delivered in a very short time. Of course, the two discoveries I mentioned are very different. Norus is a near field. It's a near field where we have facilities that have spare capacity existing, and we can connect these facilities in very short time and get in the production in very short time. Zor is a deep water frontier play, a new play that has been opened up and requires a completely different approach. But again, the way we managed was through simple packages, few packages delivered to few contractors. But the most crucial thing is to work in parallel with the geophysical contractors and in parallel also with our development people to shorten the decision time between the discovery to the FID. When we were drilling the first well, we were shooting the 3D. After we drilled the first well, We drilled the second well after 6 months. We have already the 3D processed in depth. Unthinkable 3-4 years ago. And every 2 weeks we have a new depth imaging models coming on our explorers that can drive the appraisal. So we can keep the rig working like Exxon did in Guyana without stopping the appraisal campaign because we have the data available. And we can do this. Of course, we have to challenge our organization, and as a comment I think was very good, we need a very, very careful risk assessment in all the phases of our process. But the technology is there, and procurement also can speed up a lot our decision process.
Great, thank you, Luca. I'm going to move to a question. Well, firstly, to the room, the flow of questions is slowing a little bit, so I encourage you to be active on the app so that our colleagues over here can help us with provocative questions. I'll move back to a question to Jean-Georges on the contracting side, and I think it's a strategy question as much as a tactical question. And it relates to, and I'm going to combine two questions, both anonymous. And one is really the strategy around the industry moving to multi-client versus proprietary surveys, and you know how the contractor sees that, and is that a sustainable model, do you think? And then the link question, maybe to allow you to expand, which is a second question that came from the floor. How do we see the possibility of operators sharing, you know, the concept of both rigs or clubs, which has been done in the past, and you know, from your perspective, Jean-Georges, do you see you know, one model or others or both being advantageous in this challenging world that you very well described for us earlier?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Try to cover the 2 points. Perhaps I start with the second one on the sharing and the model. You know, from a geoscience point of view, it's quite interesting to look at the way it has been developing in the last few 20-25 years. And it goes into the multi-client as well. The geoscience is a very important part of the full chain of the creation and the going up to, you know, the first oil. It's the very, very first, you know, start, and I think everybody will agree that it's a good way to reduce risk and improve success rate to start with a good seismic and a good interpretation. But yet, it is not included at all as part of the value chain. Let me explain. You know, from where we sit, and you are operators, you are buying a seismic cube, a survey, and after basically we disappear. It's in your organization with all respect, and there's never been a real economic model developed on the fact, for example, that we could contribute the geoscience survey in return for a percentage, you know, equity position into the discovery later. This model has never been really explored. I don't understand why, because it could be, you know, it could be a way of totally changing the dynamic of the situation, to say the industry is part of is a fully integrated part of the chain. It invests its own geoscience activities in return for, you know, a part of the production. And that's quite interesting that this model has never been you know, put forward. So it may be a challenge for us to look at it. It's a matter of risk management also, of course. You know, that's fully understand. And but it's clearly something that maybe with the current environment could be a good timing to explore it. With that, I think that we need to bring a principle that I like very much, which is the principle of subsidiarity. So for those of you familiar with European construction, you would know what it means. I will try to explain it very, very simply. The principle of subsidiarity is that you need to take the action and the risk at the lower level in a global chain, and at the level which is the best place to take this risk or to take this activity. Now, is it always the case with the current contractual requirements we are working with, including for your operators? I'm not sure. And so, if we want to streamline, reduce the timing, reduce the risk, have a better workflow, I think this principle is quite interesting to look at. Now, moving to your question on multi-client. Multi-client is indeed a very good way, particularly in slow time, to do cheap exploration, cheap and secured exploration. The only drawback for it is that you have to share with others the data. But when you think about it, you can access data very quickly. You can see what you buy. You can play with it. You can, simulate immediately, very quickly, because the data is available. And so, contrary to what some say, that multi-client is low when the market is low, I believe the contrary. I think multi-client is a good way to continue the exploration, to continue to stimulate the team in the operators at the time where maybe we cannot afford large surveys, large proprietary survey, which are fully optimized for a given goal. And it is not incompatible with proprietary, because you can start with multi-client taking a global view, and then you can focus on exactly what you want to do, and perhaps do a very high resolution 3D on the very smaller patch that you want to explore. So I see multi-client as a very important tool in a toolbox that we can offer our customers. And indeed, the relationship on multi-client has been changing a lot in the last 2 years, positively. Clearly, the dialogue we have with our customer on multi-client has been, making a quantum step in the last 2 years.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to stay on this theme a little bit, and Ashok, I'm going to go a little against the original flow of our design of the forum, panel 1, panel 2. And I think it would be relevant and a great insight if you could share your personal or Schlumberger's kind of view on this same question, just for the audience to kind of hear two views from two of the contractors in the world today.
You mean I should talk about how I disagree with Jean-Georges?
Yeah, if you like, that's the whole point of a debate, yes.
Well, I think obviously the idea of customers working, or let's say the oil companies working together with the service companies to make some of the advancements, like the thousands of channels that we introduced in the Middle East. We have a customer sitting right here who were the pioneers of that effort. All these developments of what we put on petaflops of machines, all these collaborations have moved on reasonably well, but the issue is that these collaborations have resulted in a lot of advancement, but the advancement has, in whatever way, and without meaning to point fingers to anybody, has resulted in seismic acquisition and processing companies like Jean-Georges and ourselves not making any money for a long, long time. Okay, so you can take this example from land seismic. Land seismic is, I would say, as far as innovation is concerned on the acquisition, pretty defunct, if you like. I'm going to be very drastic on these statements, except for the very high density channel counts in the Middle East, where we go to the 25,000 shot points or something, which I think is a good innovation in terms of acquisition. Except for that part, there is not a lot going on in land acquisition innovation, despite all the collaboration, because there is not a single organization in the world which makes any money out of that. And the current situation on offshore seismic is pretty much the same. Actually, I'm going to cover this later on. I'll give you some factoids on this subject. So all this collaboration is fine, but it has to lead to some results where technologies become sustainable. And I don't think it's like one organization doing the right thing and the other one not doing the right thing. But the way the industry paradigm is structured, this is not sustainable if we're going forward. And multi-client as a way of reducing the risk and creating a lot of excitement in a lot of companies being able to bid for a particular set of, or let's say, particular area, is probably the only way to make exploration happen in certain areas. So wherever multi-client does follow the regulator or the regulation, then it is a very viable way of making exploration happen in that area. So it is the one model that is going to continue to live for a long period of time. Now, there are places where multi-client has been used basically to, again, try to put people like Jean-Georges and us at competition even further, to try and commoditize us even further. And in those cases, even multi-client is probably not going to be able to be sustainable if you want, right?
Okay.
I think we seem to agree on this.
Yeah, I thought you were going to make a much stronger position against.
Well, I mean, the only difference is that I mean, I know Jean-Georges being very gracious in saying that collaboration results in good things, but if good things don't result in viable businesses, then those good things are, Luca, worth putting on the shelf, right? I mean,
Yeah. And I agree.
I think we all know that that's sustainable is the key word, and there's things to be explored on both sides. I'm going to move to one last question. I have a very interesting question, which I think is coming from the floor. And it's a little bit of a challenge to us as explorers here and suppliers of technology. It's on the development side, and it's from Daryl Harris. And the question is, are we moving away from optimizing, and this will be our last question, are we moving away from optimizing our development plans for value to optimizing for production? What are the risks, and can we optimize for both? And I think I'll maybe close on this one for Eric with respect to your comments that you went into Lisa. And you know, I think it's a fair challenge from the development community, and maybe you can share your insights that you're able. And I'm guessing that there's two differing views. You know, those in the development world that have been, I think, Luke, you said it very well. We've been used to doing things for maximizing the development scheme, the EUR, and now we're in a different world. And so maybe you can share. I know this is a real discussion in every one of our companies, so maybe you could share a couple insights on that.
Yeah, it's certainly a great question for the Guyana case, because that's a constant tension with the developers for that deal. Historically, I think there'd been a bit of a bias to making sure you got a hold of every drop of oil, and so really optimizing these development plans. But you're optimizing in a low data world, right? You make the discovery, they try to build the perfect development case for something that they don't actually have very much information for. And so I think there'd been a bias towards this phased approach as a learning mechanism. So get in there, start developing something, start producing, you learn, you build a better development for the next phase. In Guyana, there was also a political element where there's elections out, you know, in the 2020 timeframe. The leadership of the country is extremely interested in having first oil flow before those elections, as you might suspect. And so, not that that played, you know, hard into the decision, but you had a bunch of other factors contributing to, you know, how that decision was made. I think that the developers today are much more inclined to go in these phased developments and realize that the high uncertainty that's out there can destroy a lot of value. So you're better to kind of get in and start learning, even if that doesn't compete with a perfect overall development. But that perfect overall development, I think we're all finding, very rarely ever happens. You know, so this is a way of guarding against the, you know, the trials and tribulations you have with your development going awry.
If I can comment, I fully agree. I think there is in our organization, we see that developers are now much more inclined to accept phase development approach, because phase development anyway bring you early production, bring you some cash flows, and you learn. And you learn how the reservoir delivers, how the field is delivering. So I think the phased approach and also the distribution of capitals into the development phase we'll see more and more in the future in our projects, and this could help to accelerate our cash flow and also learning by producing on our assets. And it takes a while before the idea come through into the organization, but now I think it's getting very solid and will be more and more in the future.
Go ahead, Asher. Please.
I don't think there is, when we're talking about this reduction of cycle time from discovery to first oil, I think we are talking about deep water. Because there is this issue of how does deep water attract capex compared to very fast cycle time developments on land or in tight oil. Basically, we are debating how do you trade off these two different types of resource developments. And so if deep water stays on the 7 to 10 year horizon, as Eric was saying, then basically it's never going to be able to attract capital in the future. So I don't think there's a whole lot of choice but to do that. And however, the point that I wanted to add importantly is that this, I think we're going to discuss it more as we discuss further, this idea of digitalization, which fundamentally says that data can be used by all parts of the organization all the time. It allows you to provide for things that you can cover later, utilizing ideas that you have had up front and do tiebacks or hub-spoke developments or all kinds of things that will recover what you may have lost in the not-so-perfect development plan, if you want.
Maybe just one last, if I can make one last comment on this.
Maybe we can get Eric's mic to be live, please.
I just wanted to point out that all of these comments that we're making really point to the real challenge that's ahead of us. There's a huge challenge in industry, and it doesn't get talked about very often. For the younger members of the audience, you're going to be in the primes of your career in 2040. Some of us will be retired by then, but many of you will be working away. And it's important that you know that in 2040, the world is going to need more oil and gas than it does today. Oil and gas will still be the dominant fuel type in the energy mix. There'll be a lot of other fuels available, but we have to figure out how to supply the world with oil and gas in greater quantities than it has today. And that is a huge challenge. And you're hearing from all the panelists all the various aspects of that. On the exploration side, it's going to be very tough to go find that. With the commercial models that we have right now, we have to figure out ways to make that more commercially sustainable to go look for that kind of oil. On the development side, we're going to have to be doing things different to make sure that those hydrocarbons are brought to market. So it's going to take a huge amount of innovation, an enormous amount of capital, but I'm very confident that we have an industry that can do it. Yeah. And I think one of the most exciting areas in terms of running room is in the ultra deep water. You've got a huge amount of area out there. If you look at the amount of area that has more than 3,000 meters of water and more than 3 kilometers of sediment on it, that's 90 million or 9 million square kilometers of area, compared to the 17,000 square kilometer survey that we shot in Guyana. So a huge amount of area that needs to be explored. And we're going to have to figure out ways to make that commercially viable, and just to see what we have out there. Yeah. But that's the big challenge out there. So you should feel very excited and motivated if you're in the beginning of your career, because there's a huge challenge that the world is counting on you to deliver on, and you're going to have a great number of years ahead of you working on that. Yeah.
So just adding one small point. So it's actually very important to keep the hopper of FIDs on deep water development hot or ongoing, if you like, because otherwise it'll kill more of the technologies that go into it, and then you won't be able to do what you're suggesting.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll need to close on this. We have one more. Okay, Howard, please.
going.
Yeah. No. Go.
I-
To be fair, let's hear what
I've
you
got a
can't.
chance to get
I can't believe you waited this long to get.
No, maybe just to close, I just wanted to, well, just build on points that everyone's made, but particularly, I mean, Eric, I think for me, the commercial value is the thing that we absolutely need to aim at right now. And, you know, there are commentators out there being critical of the upstream industry in the past decade. As prices rose, did we actually destroy value en masse? And I think we probably did. So, you know, as the price comes down, you know, the real imperative is for us to return to generating value to our stakeholders, to our industry, to our governments. And I think that, so for me, the value is a point of integration, a point of collaboration now across the piece. And you know, we need to kind of get beyond values being not the outcome of a linear process to being the point where we all start, whether it's before we access something, through to discovery, through to development. And that, you know, the value piece is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have to put a bow on this part of the dialogue. We could go on all morning. Thank you very much for the insights, and we'll make a switch to the next topic. To the panelists, your honest and your shared visions, and Eric, to your conclusion about the future for the audience, I couldn't agree more. We need to take a course managed today and go from a crisis situation into a situation where we can show profitability and have investment support. But equally, the middle to long-term view is just as important, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you for your kind of nice remarks to put a frame on the whole storyline as we readapt into this lower for longer world that we're in. So thank you to the panelists. We'll move to, and as well as to the audience for the questions. So we'll move to our second topic now. Second topic being supply chain collaboration to achieve innovative solutions. And we'll have, again, the same format. We'll have the three panelists give a short presentation of their views in support of this topic and this idea. So we'll hear from Ashok, Howard, and then again Jean-Georges to conclude, and then we'll move back to the Q&A. So I encourage you to be active with the app now. You know how it works. For those watching live streaming, please join us. So we'd love to hear from you around the world. Okay, so without further ado, we'll move to Ashok to lead us off. Ashok is the Executive Vice President, Technology, Schlumberger Limited, as I said, since 2011. He's responsible for research, engineering, manufacturing, software technology, information technology, technology lifecycle management, and also leads marketing, sales, and account management functions for Schlumberger. So a very busy person, obviously. Prior to this, Ashok served as President, Reservoir Characterization, and has held other leadership positions in technical and non-technical domains. So for you, Ashok.
Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. Actually, I've covered some points already, but we'll try not to repeat some of the things. But one, I was in this first part talking about supply chain, collaboration, and innovation. I wanted to cover something which is somewhat depressing first, and then talk a little bit about something which is very exciting and coming in the future. So the first part that I have to say in the supply chain, if you go down to acquisition, we at this point in time really have a very, very difficult situation in the industry. And I'm sure Jean-Georges will agree with me on this. Seismic data acquisition for offshore, basically today is in, it's kind of one of these situations where you have tigers in India who are going to be extinct. You know, the seismic vessels are like tigers in India, if you like, today. So they are fantastic pieces of machinery, but of the 65 or 70 or so of vessels that existed, say, before 2013, and 2013 actually the offshore seismic business started to go down. 1/3 or a little more than 1/3 have all been retired or basically been junked or taken out of the business. And there's another third which is today idle or stacked, which means that the spread behind the vessel is actually rolled back in, so the spread is not even in the water, if you want. And then there's a third which is actually in the water. And of the third, maybe 70% of the third is working on in-house multi-client projects, where the service company or the acquisition company is basically probably trying sometimes to make the boat survive or the vessel survive. And then maybe there's 20 or 30 odd percent of the 1/3 which are actually being used for proprietary surveys. And so this situation, and then there's another perspective here which comes from the macro picture, which is probably more relevant for Luca, Howard, and Eric, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact is that over the last 3 or 4 years, when there's been this lull in the industry and the activity has gone down, relatively speaking, you all have been working on your project queues, and your project queues have been scrubbed with a lot of reprocessing of data and everything. If anything, the backlog of exploration wells that are already designed or already in the hopper have actually gone up, if you want. So as we sort of come back to you all spending a little bit more activity in exploration, you will start to work on that backlog first before you start acquiring new backlog, except for some places where you strategically need to be or something. So the industry doesn't look like for actually boats being used for proprietary seismic picking up in any sort of real way in up till 2020 or beyond, if you like. And I don't think there's any business of technology that can survive 7, 8 years of no business. Okay, so I just want to formulate it such that everybody understands that this picture that we face on a daily basis when we are trying to understand whether we keep boats running or we keep boats updated to the latest technologies, or we actually work on more, even further technologies in the future, this situation does not call for any further investment, if you want. So if the situation continues like this, and if some of these projects in deep water don't FID within the next year, because oil prices still stay at the $50 level or something, then there is a pretty good chance that no vessel will ever be added to the seismic acquisition fleet in the future. If anything, it will keep on dwindling downwards, if you want. So in that scenario, I don't think we are going to be spending a lot of money on R&D for any new streamers or any new acquisition capabilities or new source capabilities. And at the moment, actually, there's a lot of excitement about some new sources, ideas that are coming into the industry, but the fact is that it's very difficult to justify spending new R&D dollars on it. So here, I believe this is, and I agree with what the comments that Eric made, is that we are going to be producing oil for a long period of time. It is not all going to come from land development. It is going to come from offshore as well, and in offshore it is going to come from deep water. So in that sense, how do you make some of these capabilities survive as an industry is a difficult question to be answered. So I just wanted to put that on the table. That is the view of a seismic acquisition service company, and is not a very good picture to be painted there. Now, flipping to another side, there is an extremely interesting, innovative, in fact, almost a world of innovation that is opening up when you talk about things that people can do with data nowadays, and all of this technology that comes from companies like Facebook or LinkedIn or Google and people like that, who have done unbelievable things with acquiring data from all over the world and making that data available to multiple applications all the time. All that technology today exists, and in fact, quite interestingly, we all individually use it on our cell phones all the time, but none of us use it in our offices actually today, because of the oil and gas industry being a little bit slower on the uptake on taking these technologies. So an example of this is, for instance, the developments made by NVIDIA on GPUs, Today, I think all of us in our companies have racks and racks of GPUs, probably as an industry, probably using a bigger use of NVIDIA except for the cloud companies than any other industry in the world. And all of this data science, or let's say moving data to the cloud, helps to open up a whole bunch of opportunities which are going to change the way seismic gets processed in the future, at least maybe also how it gets acquired if we continue innovating in the area. So I believe what is going to happen, or what we are seeing, which is very exciting, is that as soon as you manage to put all the data in the cloud, then you open up opportunities for very elastic high-performance computing, very efficient high-performance computing, very relevant high-performance computing for the problems you're trying to solve, and that gives you lots and lots of opportunities of adding different kinds of analytics at different parts of the chain, the chain of innovation, and to use machine learning and things like that too. So maybe to encapsulate what this could do is that for a coming period of time, all of the data that we have in all our libraries or repositories is probably going to go through some very, very innovative processing, which will help us explore and describe subsurface reservoirs for development and production significantly better than we have done in the past. So we will be able to leverage all the data that already exists to a much higher level of productivity or efficiency in the coming future. And I think that will go in a big way towards reducing cycle times in all parts of the chain, if you like. So there's a lot of innovative solutions that will come. Now, again, this paradigm shift to using seismic data in a completely different way does require significant collaboration between all the companies involved. We will probably have to go to some level of standardization as to how these new stacks of data or new stacks of application are going to be implemented in the oil and gas industry. So I think the opportunity is big, and we will be able to achieve a lot more if this innovation comes with some collaboration amongst inside the industry as well. Yeah. So to shift gears a little bit, one very interesting bright spot, and the pun is intended here, is in Mexico, for instance, today, where there is a lot of development that's happened where the regulator has worked in close cooperation with the service businesses to actually acquire data very rapidly. In fact, what we were not able to do in almost 10 years in the US side of the Gulf of Mexico, because the development went through a lot of stages, has been achieved in a period of 2 years on the other side of the Gulf of Mexico. And a lot of very advanced seismic data is available very quickly in the development as Mexico goes to a completely different way of attracting foreign capital and foreign technology. So there are 30 plus companies today who are engaged in the process. The bid rounds are very active, $4 billion of committed capital already. The latest acquisition and the latest processing technologies have been applied to make the data available in Mexico. So at least on the positive side, there's a lot of excitement about the fact that it will open up a whole lot of interesting activity coming in the future, and hopefully here the cycle times, both in terms of discoveries and in development, will be a lot shorter than it has been in the past. Now, using all the comments that I made about cloud and the fact that some practices change to encourage fast cycle times, I believe that technically we will be able to arrive at a time where we are able to process seismic data and actually affect the acquisition while the acquisition is still being done. So interpretation-based acquisition, which I believe is a pretty revolutionary statement in the world of seismic, would be possible if we were to be able to harness all of these capabilities and be able to change practices for that to be able to happen. And it may go towards making more of deep water viable in the future, I believe. The only other thing that I want to say here is that we are also quite encouraged by the fact that even on land unconventional in the United States, in the Permian, people have picked up using seismic quite significantly, because there is this interesting aspect of trying to go for these 4 benches in the Permian, and a lot of seismic characterization is necessary to see really how the well should be placed and what kind of geochemistry to expect and to actually spot the sweet spots. So it's a very encouraging sign because it does give hope that seismic will continue to be an important factor even for unconventional developments in the future. And the same is the case a little bit in Argentina as well. So there, as the industry develops, we will see more use of seismic as well, both because of stress issues and planning the wells, and because of sweet spotting and things like that. So I think I would summarize to say that there is a lot of possibility for innovation, especially in the world of processing of seismic data, because of all the advances that are being made in the digital technology world. However, on the flip side, I think the current situation in the industry does have a damper on how these decisions are going to be made and whether we are going to be able to make some of these businesses viable because of the pressures we have in the industry today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashar. I look forward to you stimulated lots of ideas there. I like this idea of interpretation-based acquisition. I think that's going to be where the future is going to be. I'm very interested to hear the questions around that. Okay, let's move to our second presentation. I find Howard's bio. Howard Leach is BP's head of exploration and is accountable for leading the company's access, exploration, and resource appraisal activities. Howard's been in his role since 2016. Howard joined BP as a geologist in 1983. His technical experience covers exploration, appraisal, field development, and production in the UK, France, and the Far East. He's been exploration manager, director of new ventures, and vice president geoscience. So over to you, Howard.
Thank you, and thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everybody, and it's great to be here. Well, I'd like to talk about supply chain collaboration. Of course, I will talk about the seismic business, so we'll get a slightly different perspective, perhaps, Ashok, which will be great. Maybe I'll just kind of back up. I mean, clearly, seismic technology is a massive enabler for us in exploration. It has been, it is today, and I'm sure it will continue to be so. But I think what's changed to some extent is the kind of exploration pitch, certainly that I'm playing on. Whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, there was a huge focus on getting out into the frontiers to look for the next big resource. I think today, whilst that's it's still important, I think the balance has switched much more now to re-looking at the basins that we know and love, where we have infrastructure, knowledge, that we can actually, if we can find hydrocarbons, we think we can actually continue to make money. And I actually think that switch for us is massive in what it means for the sort of seismic data and the sort of seismic processing that we need moving forward, and the balance perhaps between towed streamer versus perhaps niche processing or nodes or whatever. So I think that is a fundamental change in our business that has occurred. And I also say that we're drilling as many exploration wells this year, perhaps more than we have in previous years. So actually the activity level is back up. And of course, rig rates have come down. For much reduced budgets, we can still drill as many prospects this year as we did 3 or 4 years ago. So I think it's good from that perspective, that we are maintaining activity levels in that sense. So I think what I also see that from my perspective, I'm continuing to see massive change and innovation in the seismic technology business, both on the acquisition side and the processing side. And I'd like to talk about some collaboration in that space. I mean, clearly, working with the supply chain is huge for us. BP relies on supply chain in the seismic business to acquire 100% of our seismic data and to process 90% of our seismic data. So clearly, really important. But we do staff to go beyond being informed buyers. We staff up with very high-end talent that enables us to innovate internally, but I think also to then work with the supply chain to both innovate and collaborate. And I think having that level of staffing and talent is really, really important. One area we've been trying to we've been doing over many years now is once a year getting together with some of our key suppliers to talk about not only performance but actually where we see our business going, where to listen to hear where you see your business going, to understand what long-term trends are, what activity sets are, and where we kind of see things going. And I know in some of those meetings we've talked about seeing a shift towards nodes and kind of processing trends and so on. But I do think, as point number one in terms of collaboration, starting to kind of create a shared vision of what might be possible, where things are going, where we can play together at a very high level, then creates, if you like, a playing field for the technical teams to operate that's really, really important. There's one area of technology we've been partnering with a number of companies on in recent years is our ISS technology, which is independent simultaneous sources. This is where we have multiple seismic sources running, shooting into a spread, and we can kind of separate out the different signals during the processing. And we've been innovating this, starting on land, moving offshore into towed streamer, then into seabed cables, and now into nodes. And this has driven a massive efficiency gain. This isn't just driving costs down, this is driving real efficiency improvements. And those efficiency improvements then allow us, for cheaper sums, to increase the quality of the data through increased shots. So this has been huge for us in the last 5 or so years. And critical to that success has been the ability to partner with the suppliers to enable us to learn how to actually operate at field scale safely and to provide solutions that are commercially attractive, I hope. And I talked to the folks who've been involved in that process in the last 3 years, and they kind of shared 3 areas that they thought were important for collaboration to be successful. Firstly, the need to create some flexibility to trial some stuff, to trial new technology, whether that's a processing technology or an acquisition technology. And where possible, to do that within the frame of existing programs. And we, as the operator, we realize that nothing comes for free here. This has to be kind of understood within a commercial frame too. But I remember a few years ago running a big onshore survey in Libya. We were running multiple vibrators into a single cable spread. Well, let's try and innovate with put some nodes down and see how the nodes perform. Let's try and put out a small spread of nodes and see how that works at scale, how we can compare the response into the node spread to the cables and so on. So creating those opportunities to innovate are important. And I also know from own personal experience, I have to create space in my own organization personally to convince people internally that is a risk that they should take. So I think flexibility to trial, to take some risk is important. And I think secondly, to do that within the confines, if you like, of conventional IP, commercial contracting frames is also important. Those 2 areas need to be addressed, and some space needs to be created in order to allow people to say, right, we'll go and try this thing here. And lastly, I think the environment of trust. Jean-Georges mentioned trust. I think it's massively important. Trust often built off of longer-term relationships, which are key, I think, which enable people to kind of truly, I think, understand where both sides are kind of going, strengths and opportunities across both sides, and to generate the sort of behaviors that really allow trust to work and for collaboration to succeed. And in that sense, absolutely on the acquisition side with ISS, but in BP we have several multi-year processing contracts, which have proved to be massively beneficial to us, and I very much hope to our suppliers in actually starting to not only deliver but to innovate and move forward with solutions that can be taken outside of the collaboration just with our company. So I'll kind of close there. I think shared vision, flexibility to trial stuff, creating space within contracts and IP, the world of contracts and IP, and I think relationships and trusts are key.
Great, thank you very much, Howard. Your points are very taken, and I hope that stimulates some ideas. It certainly does me about the innovative side of what we do, and we get stuck in trying to make it work in what we have instead of thinking about the future. So I appreciate your comments. Jean-Georges, we'll turn to you to close this last commentary, and then we'll move to our Q&A.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, very much in echoing what has been said by Ashok and Howard, I'd like to quickly cover 3 points. Coming back on innovation, come back on multi-client, and finish with data. 3 points are extremely important for the future. On innovation, I couldn't agree more with you, Howard, that we need to create this flexibility to try. It's so important, and it's so difficult for us to access the field, the real life, on top of all the good modeling that can be done, in the office. And one suggestion that we are sometimes putting forward with mixed success, I must say, is once we are, what is costly? What is costly is to mobilize, is to bring the vessel, is to bring the crew, is to bring all the infrastructure. Once it's there, why couldn't we, at the end of a survey, allow for, an extra week or an extra 15 days where everything is here to do a little bit, to go behind the contractual, framework and try high vibration techniques, simultaneous shootings. I think we have the framework if we want to do it, because the cost is really the mobilization, and at marginal cost, I'm sure we can create some spaces to try. So I will be quite happy to push like that. Sometimes it's difficult because the contracts are very prescriptive, and there is a start and there is an end. But if it is anticipated upfront, for us, if we keep the team another week or two, it doesn't make a huge difference. So that's a very important point for me. I come back on what you say, Ashok, on innovation, and say you're quite right. Innovation in cooperation is great, but it has to lead to some sustainable, commercial, viable models. That's for sure. However, as an industry which is highly technical, I think, despite the very difficult condition we're living in, we just can't afford to stop. And for example, for us, even in current circumstances, we still have about 250 engineers working on disruptive innovation. Now, if you ask me to say what is the return on investment today, I will be in trouble. Because it's probably very negative. But can we afford to stop? Probably no. So here we need to have a good understanding and good collaboration with our customers. And it's not necessarily asking for millions of dollars, but at least understanding that this innovation has to be partially funded at least, and has to be put in a framework of what will be for the future. And I'm back to the visibility that we are lacking today, which for me is a big, big, big impediment to R&D and innovation. If we have more visibility, if we could have, a vision of what will happen for the next 3 to 5 years, that would totally change the game, and it could be a kind of leveraging factor for the future. I also come back on innovation on IP. It's an important point, because you're right, Howard. If we don't start with the right feet forward on IP, it could be creating a lot of difficulty going forward. But again, we are not competitors with, the OFS is not in competition with the operator. That's not true. So they should, theoretically, we could find a good way to make the separation between what is important in terms of IP for us to develop our business, and for you to maintain, if you want, your competitive advantage. So that's an important point to address. I like to come back with a good example also, and I'm back to Lundin and the innovation we have on top size. It's an interesting point. I don't want to go into detail, but the way it started is that we were challenged by Lundin to say, they came to us and say, okay, we want to do zero offset acquisition in marine. Shallow targets, basalt type of environment. And so, we look at it and say, we have quite zero offset, but no zero offset. And the idea came up to say, well, we are going to put a source vessel on a spread. Wow. When the guy came in my office, I say, you're totally crazy. Okay, and then we looked at it. We had a long discussion with Lundin. We did a lot of simulation. And here we have designed a new acquisition techniques, which has never been done before, although using the same assets. So that's kind of interesting challenge. Now, the point I want to make is that this is only possible to do if you keep this integration between the three components of a seismic or geoscience company: understanding the equipment, understanding the methodology and the acquisition techniques, and understanding the processing, the imaging, and the interpretation. Nowadays, there is no one single survey that we design which is not bringing an integrated team, and where we have the processing guys, the imaging guys, the interpreters sitting nearby the guys doing the acquisition. We could not imagine that happening, because if you do a plain vanilla, that's okay, but as long as you bring complexity into it, you need to have the processors and the interpreters in the team. I think that's quite important. Moving on the second point on multi-client, I will not come back on the model, because I agree with you, Ashok, it's a great model, and I think we need to further develop it. We need to enrich it a lot, and we can, because the good news on the multi-client is that the data is ours, and we can play with it. Okay, so we can merge it, we can bring it with well data, with data which is available on the market, to take a holistic view of a basin, of a region, and that's quite important, particularly for you after that to use this data. Second comment: the data we shoot in multi-client will be reprocessed probably 3 to 5 times during its life. So the quality of the data is paramount. And when we shoot a multi-client, we don't take shortcut. It's our own money, and believe it or not, we're probably more generous with ourselves than you are with your contracts. Why? Because we know that the data which is being acquired, will have a shelf life of about 10 to 15 years. And the shelf life of the data is much longer than the time of the algorithm, the computing power, the imaging, the interpretation. Okay? So the richer the data is, the better it is. If we have to spend another $1 million because we want to have a specific azimuth or a specific frequency, we will do it, because we know that the payback will be good in time. So I insist on the quality of the data, the fidelity of the data. It's absolutely key for our future to have this data on board. Now, moving on the data side, and I fully agree with you, Ashok, the revolution that we have on the digitalization, I would like to make 3 comments. The first one is that the new technologies in digitizing, in taking a holistic view of the data, is opening up a new world. A new world for you, operator, a new world for us. Why? Because you know very well that there are a lot of data on regions, on even on wells or on basins, which are scattered in your own organization, in our own organization. You have production data, you have exploration data, you have completion data, but at the timing it is not organized in a way where you can actually take a holistic view of what's happening. So here, with a common taxonomy, with a common approach, perhaps at the end of the day a certain level of standardization, I'm sure we can do much better in grasping the value which is already existing, already on existing data, not talking about adding on that. So that's the first point. The second point is that I think with the computing power we have, as I say, this data will be reprocessed many times and will be reinterpreted many times. And here we need to create the link between ourselves and yourselves. In an ideal world, it would be great to have our guys, our geoscientists, embedded totally in your team, as we are doing from time to time, where they are part of the loop, and when there is some improvement made somewhere because we have a better idea of the velocity model, immediately we feed back into the loop of the model itself. When you have well data coming online, we shouldn't wait for 5 years to bring this well data into the feedback loop. So that's the second important point, to have a seamless flow, if you want, into the data that we have, And the last comment I'd like to make is about the knowledge we can extract from the data. I am stunned and very interested to see what the artificial intelligence and what the deep learning is going to make to our profession. I think we are just at the start of what could be brought into this domain by using massively the cloud, of course, but also the new technology. I mean, the predicts, the Watson, whatever, which are existing. Why? Because we can, with this artificial intelligence, do a lot or process a lot do the processing of certain tasks which can be fully automatized, and then free up the mind of our people and our interpreter to concentrate on where their added value is. So I think it's it's an opening game. It's just a start. It probably take 5 years, 10 years, but it's a great opportunity for our young generation, which, by the way, are much more agile than we are on those matters. And I think that I'm convinced that in 10 years from now, if we go back into our shop, into your shop, into the interpreters, we will be in a complete virtual reality, in a totally different world.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, George. I think that's very, very provocative, and I think now we'll move to questions. There's a few already surfacing, but I encourage you to be active, and I think Jean-Jacques gave us much to think about, and we'll come back to those. I certainly have my own questions, especially on artificial intelligence, and want to hear more about the panel. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to put a question actually straight back to Ashok and Jean-Georges on the supply side. And the question's anonymous, and it comes from the floor, I think. If service companies collaborate to introduce new technology to reduce costs, and then in turn your revenue goes down as a result of that, what encourages you to collaborate to accelerate the introduction of new technology? So a slightly provocative, a little bit bold, but interested to hear your views. Maybe Ashok, if you want to start.
Sorry, he said we
so I'll repeat it again, yeah. So if service companies collaborate, work with the operators to introduce new technology to reduce costs, and then your revenue in turn falls as a result of the cost reduction efficiency gain, slightly provocatively then, if the end game is to the operator, then what's in it for the supplier to work innovatively, spend your money, spend your time, your research and development, which Jean-Georges and both of you actually talked about, to innovate, to reduce costs, if that's the end game. So it's a provocative question on how is that a sustainable model? Or what would you suggest it has to be to create a sustainable model, maybe giving you the chance?
So when we collaborate with our customers, let's say we are developing a new technology for I don't know, doing something. In Eastern Canada, we're trying isometrics with Exxon, let's say. We are working on, let's say, a new way of imaging, new acquisition technique and new processing technique there. We generally, in that case, obviously the upside is very clear to Exxon, but they are reducing their cost in their total cycle somewhere, and we are gaining revenue one way or another. So, when our revenue, even if it goes down when we've designed it so that we actually make more money from it. Because of the way the product and the solution is developed. Or otherwise, if the product or the solution is more complex, then our revenue does go up, and it reduces the cost for the customer even then. Or sometimes, for instance, as Howard was saying, we have simultaneous source acquisitions that we do in the North Sea. We may actually be even giving some IP advantage to our customer, and as Jean-Georges said, generally we are not competing with our customer, so we should be able to have rules of the game set that we gain as well and the customer gains at the same time. And generally when we are coming into a collaboration, it's clear to both sides that there is benefit for both sides, and so we fix it such that we sit on the same side of the table once the contract is done or when the collaborating exercise is put in place. Now, this kind of technology development has been going on for a long time. This is not new. We've been working together with all of the customers sitting here for quite some time. So these methods are pretty well understood. The issue comes when there is a collaborative thing going on where the oil company also then wants to commoditize that technology and get it from everybody else for a very cheap price. Then that cannot be called a collaboration because, as Howard was suggesting, it has to take care of the fact that it ends up in a viable business for the participants, if you like, right? So generally, of course, if you're doing your homework correctly, that should be the case, right?
Just as a follow-up on the commoditization, I think you hit the very point, is that there is actually very little example where a true innovation has given the company who was innovated a clear leadership for more than a couple of years. Very few.
It's ephemeral.
It's very ephemeral, absolutely. And so we need to find, in a model, the right return, because if at the end of the day you're spending a lot of R&D money for very little protection, it's true that it's complex. So that commoditization is a big issue. And frankly, I understand the point of the operators, because if you have a good solution somewhere, you don't want to be locked in with just one, and you need to be able to spread that across. So we need to find the right level of protection. I think it's a key point. The second point is because you discussed the collaboration between the OFS and the operator, but I like to challenge a little bit ourselves, is that we are very, very poor in collaborating between us. We are such in a competitive world that it's extremely difficult to actually put forward a true, long-term R&D program where the industry could be together and propose something to the operator, which, by the way, would be a very good way to treat in advance the commoditization.
Yeah, I think actually Howard also alluded to it. I know you talked about visibility. I think one of the interesting things that is not very too much to ask for from, let's say, a large group of oil companies is to give us better visibility, especially for seismic acquisition in the near future, since all your programs are quite uncertain based on the uncertainty of the business coming up ahead. At the very least, we could have some kind of a roadmap on which we could share with each other, which could help us make our decisions of what kind of investments we should make and we should not make, if you like. Whereas normally we are most of the time guessing as to where you're going to be at in acquisition.
Right.
So that could be helpful, if you like.
Yeah. Maybe this one's kind of an interesting topic to continue a little bit. Howard, would you like to share the operator's view on this one?
I think we do try and share a forward view, but I think even today to get beyond 2 years is kind of tough. It's tough within individual pieces of business. It's tough to kind of predict, how partnerships will respond to ideas. So, I think we kind of get a good view a year out. I would love to be able to get further out. I mean, when I was kind of looking after seismic at BP, we would try to generate a 5-year plan, but we kind of realized that, 2 years was as best as we were ever going to get. So I think it's just difficult. So I think maybe the challenge for us, and it would be great for our business if we could look further into the future and try and predict. So I think that's probably around better planning, frankly.
Yeah, I think there are more aspects to. Let me take a parallel from the semiconductor industry. The semiconductor industry has the semiconductor companies and the people who sell them, the capital equipment that goes into the factories that make semiconductors. And both the semiconductor industry and the capital equipment industry follow what is called a Sematech roadmap. And the Sematech roadmap basically achieves the purpose of giving people an idea of what is coming up ahead, where people from the industry actually get to. It's kind of like an API-like body, if you want, but they do put out a very formal roadmap, which also serves to standardize certain aspects of technology development, such that everybody's not going off in his own direction, if you like. So, for something like deep water and things like where the number of players is not that many, relatively speaking, to have some kind of a roadmap would probably be helpful, I would say.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move to a question now, going back to actually something you finished on, Jean-Georges, and I'm going to put this one with Howard. It's anonymous and it's on the floor, and it's about innovation, but it's on the artificial intelligence, and it's very direct. It's, there's much talk about artificial intelligence, and it's true. And really the question is, how do you see this as part of your forward strategy? And I think it'd be interesting to hear certainly your views, Howard, on this.
It's absolutely massive. In BP, we've got a major modernization and transformation program underway across the group to basically digitize our business. Absolutely. A lot of the production data is actually all now completely digital, which is brilliant. It's amazing how quick we've got there. We're now looking at kind of, example, taking all our geoscience data from, I'd like to say 100 years, it's not quite that much, but we've got literally millions of boxes, and it now seems realistic that we can get that digitized in a very short space of time and get it kind of at the fingertips of our explorers. So, massive efficiency in getting quality data to explorers really quickly. And I think then going beyond that, I think there's, it was great to hear acquisition to interpretation. Where can we take interpretation? I mean, over the road, there are some fantastic examples of more automated interpretation solutions already coming through. Where's that going to go with AI and potentially with cognitive coming down the line? I mean, I think it's just fantastic. I saw an example in my shop of a new interpretation package a couple of weeks ago, and literally, the speed and the quality of the pick was way beyond, where, an interpreter would have gone in 2 or 3 weeks. It was done in a couple of days, and that leaves time for people to then think about What are the alternative models? Where should the pick go across the fault? Could it be bigger? Could it, all of those things. And I'm actually starting to really engage the real brain power of the interpreter rather than doing kind of rather mundane tasks. So I think it's going to be absolutely fundamental to our business in sooner than you could possibly imagine.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Howard. I'm going to move to another question now. This is also anonymous, if I can find it. A little bit provocative, and it's a controversial topic in the industry today, and you alluded to it, I think, Ashok, and as well as maybe Jean-Georges. But I think it'd be good to get, both the supplier and the operator view on this, and it's really about equities in the models as we go forward. And this one is from Jean-Marc Oulani. In fact, it's not anonymous. Some service companies are taking equities in acreage. Do you see this as a new collaboration or increased competition? So I think it'd be interesting to hear differing views on this one.
I'm happy to start if you want. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Jean-Georges.
Okay. Okay. Taking equity in a block for a company like ours will be very, very, very difficult to be a true equity player. And I would make a difference between taking equity as a revenue flow or taking equity as a risk taker, which is a very different point. We don't see ourselves taking equity as a risk taker. And to explain very, very easily why, is because, we are, at the end of the day, we have to serve our shareholders. Shareholders investing in CGG, they invest for a certain profile of risks. Okay? And if we have an equity on the block in terms of risk taking, if something, if you have a major issue linked to drilling, linked to completion, how could we justify to our shareholder base that we have the in-house expertise to mitigate this risk? That's not possible. So we are making for us a clear cut in, if you want, there is a border not to cross, which is the risk taking on equity in drilling and so on. On the other side, if we look at the commercial side, we could be quite open to discuss the revenue flow and the risk and reward. It's not the risk and reward, it's the, being paid on success, which is a different matter.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Georges. Howard, do you want to comment at all, or difficult question, perhaps?
It's a tough one, but I could see Jean-Georges' comment exactly on the risk side. Your shareholders, I guess your balance sheet's not set up to take risk in that respect.
Exactly.
Whether there's something more creative that could be done with a proven asset, potentially.
Yeah.
So which would be more different
or
revenue.
to say, for example, we invest a seismic, and we are paid with the right multiplier.
Yeah.
If and only if the well is successful, or if you start extracting oil or gas out of the well.
Yeah, but it has to be a fairly low risk proposition.
Absolutely, it has to be a low risk proposition.
I don't
At
think
least
there
for us.
are.
You have a bigger balance sheet than I have, so maybe easier for you.
Yeah, well, we certainly do kind of have some cases where we do participate with our customer in some developments, but generally we are never taking exploration risk. That is really the fundamental métier or the skill set of an E&P company, and I think I don't know about Jean-Georges, but at least my company, I can say we are not at the level of being explorationists. That's really your job, if you want, right? We may have some ideas of how to improve the models and then make better decisions, if you like. And so the idea that some of our people are associated with you very closely, that makes a lot of sense, but that doesn't really lead to taking equity participation. It does, even the value proportion is not quite justifying any equity sharing, if you want. So in the world of exploration and seismic interpretation, I think it's much better that we stay in our area and work on making the technology go further and the results to improve, if you like, right?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I know it's a topical one, and I appreciate the risk sharing comments that you make. I'm going to move to one that's a question here that is anonymous that came a little bit earlier, and it's a kind of long-term, and I think this one will be for Howard, and it's really it's a question of kind of the world we're in, where I think it was discussions about the crew change yesterday and the realities of the baby boomers. So it says, given the current discussion about the future need for oil and gas in 2040, which is what your remarks were, Eric, earlier in the session, how are the companies protecting or ensuring that the vast amount of knowledge is not lost in this downturn? And I know from our perspective, I know every one of us worries about this, so maybe Howard, you could address this one.
No, it's huge, and echoing Eric's comments, we are in a business that naturally declines by something like 70% every year, right? Yeah. Every oil field tends to. So just to keep things flat, you've got to replace that amount of production every year. So, even in a world where we reach peak oil at some point in the future, there's a massive amount of business and work to be done still in maintaining the oil and gas production the world needs. I think retaining capability and knowledge is massive at the moment. I mean, we have continued as a company to recruit through the low cycle, and I think that's massively important. I know we as a company can, and I think many of the industry remember back in the 90s when price crashed and everybody stopped recruiting almost without exception, and we kind of suffer from it kind of even today. So we have tried to sustain some level of recruitment. But I think I'm going back to the digitalization side of it here. I think there's actually a massive opportunity here to regain the knowledge of the past that's actually been forgotten, because there's so much information out there and so much has been carried in people's brains, and those people, many of them have now left the industry, kind of now sits in reports boxes, but it's kind of, a lot of it's still there. And I think it's possible now to actually start to re-access this and get it live to people where they need it really, really easily. And actually, I think that could take us to a very different place. So I think it's a combination of maintaining the talent in the industry, absolutely, but how do we kind of bring not only data but knowledge back to people's fingertips?
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, it's an important one. With the idea, there's quite a few questions, so I'm going to move on to...
Can I put a little
Of course.
I personally think that the oil industry needs a big change. I think at least 50% of the people should change to more modern people, younger people who are used to working in a different way. Maybe another 50% of the 50% remaining should retire. And there will be enough knowledge in the industry to carry it on, if you want.
Yeah. Well, there's a provocative thought for the room to consider. So, Luca, please, yes, I can see there's energy here. This is good.
Definitely, I believe that digitalization will do a lot to improve our business, and definitely in all the upstream chains, not just in exploration, but in reservoir, in development, everything. We have a lot of data in our companies that we don't exploit at the maximum. However, remember that we need good geologists. And we need people that know rocks, that understand the rocks, and they go on the field understanding the rocks, because digitalization can do a lot, but you need to have a pervasive basic knowledge of a geology that you cannot completely substitute with a machine. Rocks are difficult to predict. Every rock you drill is different from the other. How many surprises we have when we start producing our reservoirs. So my message is, of course, we will have enough competence in 10 years' time. We will see a massive change in our crew and a massive digitalization of our process. But again, we need people going on the field, university making the basic formation on rocks, on the outcrops, and people competent on the subsurface. This cannot be avoided if we want to be successful also in the future.
Yeah, I think your point is well noted, and Luke and I were involved in a discussion last week on this same topic around what is an oil finder, and the trade-off between using the advanced technology digitally and the basics of our science of geology, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, thank you for those comments. I'm going to move now to one innovative question, a question around innovation. And the question makes a statement, and then, the makes a comment, and then a question. It's around drilling, and I think perhaps it's best addressed, Ashok, for yourself. And the comment says 60-80% of our exploration spends, and in fact, I'll expand it to say the development world is linked to drilling costs. Any insights? And we'll expand this to the group a little bit. I think it's a very relevant one around what the companies are doing with regard to innovation to reduce the cost, both technical and on the procurement, supply, and of course from the contractor's perspective. So maybe you could start.
Maybe I'll start and then give over to BP or Exxon or ENI. There are maybe 3 buckets of cost reduction, and I'll limit my comments to deep water or offshore. They are basically deflation coming from the service industry costs, if you like rigs that you mentioned before. And there is efficiencies which are brought in because there's just so much pressure on the industry to become more efficient. And then the third, which is really your part, is that there are designs being changed or standardizations being pushed on the designs such that you make it simpler and lower cost developments. And all these 3 result in the 30 to 40% reduction that is probably putting some projects into FID hoppers, if you like, right? So I think while this effort is going on and it will still continue, there is still interesting developments to come from. Again, it starts from this digitalization idea, is that every exploration well being drilled in, let's say, the Gulf of Mexico or something, should be using all of the information that is available from all the wells that have been drilled in the Gulf of Mexico in the past, if you want. But today is obviously not the case. The information from the drilling of the past wells goes through some interpretation into people's minds, and then people's minds use that knowledge to drill the next well. And it should be a lot more scientific than that, and a lot more capable than that, if you like, to be able to make the well drilling significantly more efficient as well. And engaged in this, inside this, embedded in this statement, there is things about how you visualize data, how you analyze data, how you predict on data, and how you help the driller, and how you help the the cementing person and the drilling fluids engineer all in real time to be able to make things more efficient. And I'm just trying to precify it, if you like, but the fact is that there will be more enabling systems that will come that will allow all the actors who are involved in planning and drilling a well to be able to be more intelligent, if you like, coming from the system providing them the intelligence, and hence it'll make this whole system more performant or efficient. So this development, I think, is still to come, and it has legs, if you like, for a long period of time. Yeah. Meanwhile, the other 3 categories will play up or down. I'm sure the service industry costs will come up a little bit, because otherwise deep water will be defunct as well pretty soon. And on the other hand, the design level thinking of and getting standardization to make wells more efficient will continue to go further down. Mm-hmm.
Some comments from the operator's view?
All right. Well, there's 2 elements to the deep water drilling deal, and I think a lot of organizations are pushing on trying to drill more efficiently and get the well costs down for the success case drilling of wells and have that be cheaper. But when you look at the total cost of drilling for the industry in the deep water, there's a efficiency, get them down quickly, and then there's a protection, avoid the catastrophic event. And I think we're seeing that the cost of the catastrophic event to the industry is up and up and up, is an extremely high cost. So you have to put a lot of energy into how do I keep that from ever happening to me? And then you're balancing that against how do I make the day-to-day drilling, the most likely well, a little bit better. And those things are often in competition. It's often the whole design of drilling is balancing those two things. So I think we need to do better, but I think it's going to be unlikely that you see a significant shift in that arena because those things are going to be constantly balancing each other.
Howard? Yeah, of course, we come at this from a very particular perspective of recent history, and I think what you say is absolutely right, Eric. It is our focus has been very much on safe drilling over recent years, and moving forward with safety, and then efficiency has kind of become an outcome of that. As we drive a safety agenda, how do we get wells down safely without risk? To some extent, we're kind of learning efficiency, which takes us to other places, and learning about where we absolutely need to put barriers in place. So, for us as a company, it's been a long journey, and I think through the safety angle, we are actually now getting into an efficiency conversation, but it's only on the back of safe drilling.
No, I think I fully agree with Howard. So I think safety in deep water drilling is paramount importance, and efficiency derives from safety. And definitely, what we see in our company is that the well planning, especially in deep water, we can do a better job when we put in a very tight cooperation and collaboration all our specialists, starting from the geologist, pore pressure prediction. There is a lot of work, preparatory work for engineering planning, that if we do properly, we can optimize the safety of our drilling and the final cost. So here, integration, it's a paramount importance. It's not just before drilling, it's just throughout all the process, also during the drilling, because every day you can have, from the drilling results, way of optimizing the operation. But I fully agree with Ashok that this is one of the areas where probably the use of massive data digitalization and learning algorithms can provide an help, because every time we reinvent a wheel when we drill a well in a basin, sometimes our geologists change, our geophysicists change, our drilling engineers change, and if we have a robust database where we can derive the basic information for facilitating the plan of the well, it will help a lot to be more safe and more efficient in our deep water drilling. So that's my view. It's a lot to do here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I think it's going to be a topic, and the safety topic has to remain paramount. I think we're all in full alignment. You can't have anything else but that, and I think the efficiency side we're all realizing is a consequence, as you rightly put it, Howard. I think it's time. I'm going to draw the session to a close now, and firstly, just thank all of the audience for your time and participation. The active questions worked very well. I hope you enjoyed this session, and in fact, I hope that you take away many insights and, in fact, actions from this dialogue. That was our intention, was to create a dynamic, and I really will congratulate the panelists and thank them for really very in-depth and thoughtful and very honest, real answers to these challenges that we live in this current climate, which is not easy. And I think it was well said, we don't know what the future oil price will be. Eric gave us some very interesting, I think, and stimulating and quite optimistic view of the reality of the energy oil mix in the future. We certainly have that same view. Oil and gas is going to be a part of the energy business for a long time. And so for those of you, just to echo what Eric said, the reality is you're entering a career that has longevity, as much as contrary to what the public demand would say. We all believe that, and I think if you look at the facts around the renewables business and the shift to clean energies, it's all going to happen. There was a big session yesterday afternoon on the debate of the impact of COP21. So I think that's a real vision, and it's a thoughtful vision. And for me, this has been a very stimulating dialogue around what do we need to do to make exploration and we talked a lot mostly about the conventional world. It's a consequence of our backgrounds and the businesses we manage. But I think it's a reality that we need to get back to being innovative again. I heard that several times from the panelists, and certainly both from the supply side as well as the operator side. I'm not sure we're doing enough, and I think we can do more. And there were some very good ideas. Jean-Georges, you had some great ideas around what practically we can do to try and make this efficient. We're not, I remember when I first started my career, I was involved in the acquisition side, and we were always trying to unlock new ideas. And every program we did, we had innovative things, testing that we did at the end of every program. It was just the norm. And so I think we need to make innovation the norm again. And I was pleased to hear some of the comments from all of the companies. All of our panelists talked about that specific subject. I heard comments on shared views. We heard a lot about collaboration, this idea of relationships and trust, both between the operator and the supplier, I think was very clear. But I was very interested to hear the commentary between Schlumberger and CGG and the realization that we need to work in that space somehow too. And I think there's much more to be done with that. I think this idea of the so-called trial and error approach to innovation and certainly emphasizing how we do R&D as a part of that. As I said yesterday, technology got us to this place. It was very clearly stated by Ashok that this is a technology business. It's going to remain that. So what are we going to do to unlock the future? We heard many examples of the cycle time, and yesterday I referred to what the U.S. unconventional business did. And those of you who watched that in the oil price fall 2 years ago, 3 years ago now almost, these people reinvented the world. They were in crisis. The people running the independent businesses, and especially in the tight oil side, instead of stopping, they went to innovation and they went to testing to unlock, and they went to efficiency, and it's very impressive. And if you've seen the curves of the oil production in tight oil in the U.S., it's straight up, and we're in a $50 world. Before the crisis, that wasn't possible. So I was very intrigued. If they can do it, there's no reason why the conventional business, and I really compliment Eric and Luca for their very honest and insightful view of what each of these companies, and I know BP is doing it too. I don't mean to exclude BP in this. It's just to comment on the two projects that we heard insights on. It's very impressive when we put these collaborative minds together, what we can do as companies in industry. And I think Zora and Lisa are going to be the U.S. tight oil equivalents, and we'll look back on these projects. And of course, as from the outside of the industry, we watch you carefully, and we commend you and support you from the concept of what we do, because we need to, and it's through forums like this where we share how we approach that we'll get better together, as they say. So with that, I will just once again thank all the panelists and congratulate you on your presentation and really this interaction. I hope you all enjoyed it. So thank you very much for your couple hours of your time.